Shalom and welcome to Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible. Today we're looking at Leviticus chapter 18. There are 30 verses beginning in verse 5. Ordinances versus statutes. The word all was omitted, and all was omitted twice. Your Elohim, or your God, was omitted. Verse 6 to 8. Okay, this is more of a discussion of uncover their nakedness. Okay, what does that mean? Uncover their nakedness does not literally mean to remove their clothing until they are naked. What it means, it is a idiom. It is uh, a way of saying to commit fornication with. To uncover the nakedness of someone is to have sexual relations with them. Nakedness by itself means, and I'm speculating here, means the sexual property of, to be partaken of only by the specific party, which they are a part of through the covenant of marriage. Perhaps you can also replace nakedness with the word body. Uncover the body. Okay. Anyway, as a man and a woman, or husband and a wife become one body, so we uncover their nakedness. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Verse 9, the Masoretic explains it a little bit better, um, because it is identifying the daughter of the mother or father. It is not an act done by the father or mother. It is the wording that can be confusing if you don't read it carefully. So let's read the sept first. The nakedness of your sister by your father or by your mother, born at home, you shall not uncover. Okay, so they're saying your sister who is by your father or by your mother. So it isn't saying that the father or mother is doing it. That's not, it's just the way it's worded. I think if you really understand the language of this, it's saying that your sister who is by your father or your mother. So whether your sister, you share the same father as your sister or the same mother, you will not commit incest with them or fornicate with them. Whereas the Masoretic sounds a little more clear just by its wording, saying the daughter of your father or the daughter of your mother. I mean, this is, it means the same thing in the sept, but it can be confusing if you don't understand what by means. Is your father is the author of your sister, basically. The mother is the author of the sister. So they are the author. They're the one who created that life. It's not that they're doing something by them. Let me do this by you. Not like that. Um, okay, so moving on. Verse 11 seems to indicate that a half brother or a half sister is off limits. Um, Notice that. Do not uncover the nakedness of the daughter of your father's wife. She is your sister by the same father. You shall not uncover her nakedness. So the question must be asked, does that mean Abraham and Sarah should not have happened? Because were they not half brother and half sister? This is a big question that I have. So it's not a question that I'm answering. It's a question I'm posing, and I need help with this one. So please comment on this here. Was there some type of exception for Abraham? And this is a serious matter. It needs to be understood properly. I suspect it means that the mother is the same, but then again, that would be a repeat of verse 9, which already says that you will not do it with the sister of the same mother or father. So there's no exceptions to that rule. Um, Maybe that this law didn't apply to Abraham and Sarah because maybe this law was not codified yet, since they existed before this law was codified. That's my speculation there. And some people argue that the earlier in the bloodline you go. So Adam and Eve, for example, had very pure DNA. There was no risk of any genetic defects or mutations or anything like that would happen as a consequence of incest, where there are a lot of, uh, so they say in science at least, that when two closely related people, whether they're siblings or cousins or whatever, they say that the gene pool deteriorates, like it's not good for the gene pool. Um, but notice that in this chapter, it doesn't condemn uh, cousins, fornicating with cousins, because that, although the media brings that down, uh, and they portray it as very, unintelligent people who do that, and they say it's primitive and all that, that's actually not outlawed in the Bible. It's not something that is condemned in the Bible. I'm not advocating, let's all marry our cousins, but I'm just saying that's a fact. Um, Maybe there are a lot of advantages to that, and I think you see that in some religions where they they continue to do this, where close relations, specifically cousins, do marry each other, and when you look at families, they're actually closer when they do that. They retain their culture, they retain their identity, and things like that. So there are advantages to it. I understand the social stigma around it, because people who are closely knit families, they find it very very awkward, very abnormal. It's not something that is portrayed in the media and in most Western society as normal. But in the Bible, there's nothing against that. So you wouldn't be breaking any of God's commandments if you married your cousin. That's actually not against God's law. It's not against the Torah to do that. But it is against the Torah to marry and fornicate with your sibling, obviously. But it says that here explicitly, even half brother, half sister. But that may not have applied to Abram and Sarah for whatever reason, which I do not know. And then verse 14, there's a significant difference in verse 14. It says here, a relation. She is your relation. It says, your father's brother, and go into his wife. Okay, so your uncle's wife, so that's your aunt. But it says here, for she is your relation. Um, it's a little cryptic, I think, or it's a little hard to understand. Okay, she's a relative, but in the Mass, it's a little clear. It's just explicit. That's your aunt. Uh, but if you're reading the Sept and you're really analyzing why does it say relation, this is the um, this is the rationale behind why you're not going to do this, because she's your relative, your close relation. I think that's the, not just relative, because a cousin is a relative, but that's not outlawed here. But she is your close relation, and there's just something wrong with it that is deemed wrong. And when you follow the law, it just becomes second nature. So I can understand why that would be wrong. Obviously, she's someone else's wife. Uh, Notice, I'm not, this sounds a little strange, but notice it doesn't say the nakedness of your, let's say, father's sister that is single, for example. But the thing is here, uh, she is a wife, or they are married. So I don't know if there's a law. I don't, it doesn't explain it or condemn it, but, and it sounds strange because there's a lot of weird things and fetishes about this, but somebody who is having sexual relations with their perhaps their aunt or their uncle, but they are single and they have never been married, so they're pretty much a bachelor, bachelorette, but they have sexual relations with their, either their niece or their nephew. It sounds really gross to me personally, but I don't know. There's nothing about that either. But I just find that I guess it's just something, just kind of gives me the creeps. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there because there's no prohibition against that, but we'll just keep going on, see if maybe there is. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. Okay. Um, she's your son's wife. Yeah, so these are all married people, brother's wife. So this can only be broken if the brother dies. So you cannot uncover the nakedness. You cannot have sex with your brother's wife while he's alive. But once that brother dies, that can be broken, or that can be allowed to happen, because that's part of the law. I think it's the Leverett marriage law, where a brother is supposed to continue the seed, the generations, the legacy of the dead brother under his name, but through his brother's DNA, through his seed. So, verse 17, the nakedness of a woman and her daughter you shall not uncover. So, doing it with the mom and the daughter, her son's daughter. Okay. So that sounds like a granddaughter and her daughter's daughter. So, again, granddaughter, you shall not take to uncover their nakedness, for they are your kinswomen. It is impiety. So, it is impiety versus wickedness. I didn't want to put that as a difference, but it's not a huge difference. Um, so in verse 17, this sounds like what they call swingers, uh, just doing it with everybody, the mom, the daughter, the granddaughter. It's just everyone's free to just do. Um, I don't notice here that they might be single. So, but the stipulation is and. So you're doing not just one, you're doing all of them. And that's going to be a very bad situation with rivalry and jealousy, I think. Verse 18, rival. Oh, speaking of which, as a rival versus to vex. So that's actually a pretty big difference. I'll put BD. Yeah, that's a big difference. If you take a woman, a wife, in addition to her sister, as a wife too, and they become rivals, uh, don't do that on purpose. Obviously, with Jacob, in the case of Jacob, he did that, but he was tricked. He didn't want to do that, and you can see what happened there. It was a not a good situation for the sisters, but he had to deal with that. Had to live with that, and then look at the next in the Maz. It says to vex her. So to vex uh, is different than just than a rival, because of to vex someone is to annoy them, to bother them, but a rival is just more straight to the point. Uh, it is more profound and more serious, I think, than just bugging her. Don't bug her. Don't vex her. Don't stress her. But a rival, you can see that's really a long term thing. That there's a lot behind that word. Okay, moving to the next difference, in opposition to her, to uncover. So in opposition to her, so you're having sex in opposition to her while she is yet living. Uh, so opposition is like adversarial, enemy. So you're creating an enemy out of her. You're either making her an enemy to her sister, or you're doing this as an adversarial act against your wife. So you see, that's a pretty big difference too. So these are two big differences. I'm going to just put times two. So not only is it a rival, but you're in opposition to her. So you're it's not only besides the other in her life. Um, that doesn't make sense. So the Maz doesn't make sense in that regard. It makes more sense in the Sept that you're doing this as an opposition, as a adversarial thing. This is kind of malicious. You're not doing it in a wholesome way. Oh, let me just do you and your sister. Oh, this is so wholesome and so kind. No, it's not. That's very. There's going to be a lot of fallout from that. Two women that are sisters and rivals, even if they were best friends, they're not going to be best friends after this. I guarantee you that. having one man between the two of them. There's a sibling rivalry that goes on. Verse 21, the whole verse is different. Not that we should sacrifice our children through the fire to this name right there. It's not what it's saying. It doesn't even say the name in the original. That's not what is said here. So let's read. You shall not let any of your children pass through. I just paraphrased. Of your seed pass through the fire to that name, M. Neither shall you profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yah. Versus the Sept saying, you shall not give of your seed to serve a ruler. Wow, okay. So they won't, hold on. So it's wrong. Let me just think about this a little deeper. Was it wrong for Daniel to serve the king? Because he kind of served a ruler, and so did, to some degree, I believe Joseph did serve a ruler in Pharaoh. So was that wrong? But notice, in both of those situations, they didn't volunteer to serve the ruler. They were forced to, under duress, under for Joseph, he was sold into slavery, and then for Daniel, well, the Babylonians just took over. You either go with the flow or you get executed. So they decided to go with it and just humble themselves. So that's a lot different than taking your children and giving them over like a slave or a servant to another government. This it doesn't say foreign government, it doesn't say domestic, but either way, you don't give your seed to serve a ruler. Maybe that is an Elohim. Maybe ruler as in an Elohim ruler. I'm not sure, but I just read it as it is. But it is a lot different than passing through the fire to M there. That is a huge difference. Yeah, that's. Let me just put HD. That's a huge difference in verse 21. But the title of this video is, I believe it's incest and things like that. But this is more of a footnote, but that's a pretty huge difference as well. I was going to make this the title, but I decided not to. Verse 23, quadruped for copulation to be polluted with versus a beast to defile. Uh, okay, so you're not just defiling a beast. I mean, yeah, they're lying with a beast and they're defiling themselves, but it's a lot more explicit in the SEP where they're lying with any quadruped with four legs, and they are, you know, doing it with it, and that's um, they they are polluting themselves by doing that act. Um, and then it says connection versus lie down. So it's not just lying down next to them or sleeping, in a bed with your dog. It's having a connection with it, and that implies sexual intercourse. There you go. I said it. And then abomination. It is an abomination. That's how bad this is. This is another level of sin. It's not just transgression. It's not just impiety. This is an abomination. This is one of the worst. Uh, versus confusion. That's yikes. That's a pretty big difference. I'm gonna put big difference. So that's a big difference. It's one thing to be an abomination, and God hates that. Yah hates this. But it's another thing for it to be confusion. Confusion for who? It sounds like confusion for the people. I mean, obviously, Elohim is never confused, so it is a confusion for the people. That doesn't make sense. No, it is an abomination to everyone involved and everyone who sees it and everyone who speaks about it. It's an abomination. Period. There's no cutting around it. Okay, verse 25. Recompensed their iniquity versus visit their iniquity. So you repay them for it. Visiting, it's kind of similar. A significant difference here is aggrieved. The land is aggrieved with them that dwell upon it. So the land is kind of very much in not shock, but is grieving. It's sad. It's in a good situation. The land is not content, or not just content. It's a bad situation. It's very bad. Versus the land itself vomits out her inhabitants. So this is I'm gonna say is a big difference, a significant difference, but I'm gonna say a big one. And the reason why I say it's a big one is because this is a memory verse. A lot of people memorize this verse or have knowledge of it because what is the result of all of the sin and iniquity on the land is the land itself vomits out her inhabitants. But that's not actually what's happening. The land doesn't vomit out people. It's God that takes them out. The land doesn't vomit it. The land is aggrieved with them that dwell upon it and is waiting for retribution. And that takes God to intervene, or another way, either another foreign king, or God uses somebody to evict these people or to deliver justice to them. And then verse 26, ordinances versus judgments. Verse 28, aggrieved versus spew you out. So it's spewed out. The nations are before you. So continual difference. That's continuing the same line of thought from verse 26. Verse 29, destroyed versus cut off. And then the last verse is practices versus customs. And then before your time, which have taken place before your time. Before your time was omitted, specifically time. It just says before you. They were done before you. So that could mean before their face. In the Mass, it's saying before your face or before you were here. But we can see in the Sept, it's not ambiguous. It's very clear that it took place before your time, before you came here. This is what these people did, and that is why the land is aggrieved and was polluted by their actions, by their lifestyle. And it says before you um, in the Mass. Okay, so that's all I have to cover for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. You've just watched Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible. Shalom.